Today on the Matt Walsh Show, a new database reveals just how many hospitals across the country have performed gender transitions on minors. The left has claimed for years this isn't happening or is happening only rarely. We've always known that's a lie. Now we can prove it. Also, Kamala Harris does a media tour designed to make her seem personable and likable. It has, of course, the opposite effect. There's a whole community of people out there who call themselves COVID conscious and are still living like it's April of 2020. We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. DW Plus and Jordan B. Peterson bring you the Mastering Life Collection. Essential guides on everything from marriage to mental health, including his newest series on depression and anxiety. Get unlimited access to Peterson's wisdom, plus upcoming series on negotiation and success. Join DW Plus at dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code Jordan for 35% off your annual membership. Folks, Harris's so-called economic plan is nothing short of a disaster. Brace yourselves for massive tax hikes. We're talking an almost 40% top income tax rate, a 7% increase to the corporate tax, and a ridiculous capital gains tax on unrealized gains. All this just so that she can add nearly $2 trillion to our already bloated $2 trillion deficit. If you're like me, you're probably thinking it's time to make more of your savings tax sheltered and inflation sheltered. This is where I turn to the good people at Birch Gold Group. They've been helping me, and they can help you too. Birch Gold will assist you in converting an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. And here's the kicker. You don't pay a penny out of pocket. It's that simple. Just text the word Walsh to 989898 and get a free info kit on gold. There's no obligation, just solid information on fortifying your savings before things really go off the rails. As the exclusive gold partner of the DailyWire for the past 8 years, with an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied customers, you could trust Birch Gold just like I do. Don't let the left's economic madness catch you off guard. Text Walsh to 989898 for your free info kit today. That's Walsh to 989898. As Joe Biden's run for re-election was on the verge of collapsing this summer, an unnamed White House official briefly went off script amid all the chaos that was unfolding in the West Wing. Speaking to a variety of news outlets, including the New York Times, the White House official announced that so-called gender-affirming surgeries, quote unquote, should never be conducted on children. Quote, these surgeries should be limited to adults, the spokesman said. Now, at any other point in this country's history, that answer would have been ridiculed for one simple reason. It doesn't go nearly far enough. Doing that to someone's body is wrong, whether the victim is an adult or a child. But this summer, the White House found itself besieged by trans activists who believe that doctors should be able to mutilate children's bodies without any interference from the government. There was anxiety and concern through the trans community, quote unquote, over the anonymous White House official statement, according to The Guardian. And this created a massive headache for the White House at a pretty inconvenient time. Biden was refusing to take the hint and step aside. He was threatening to take the entire party down with him. And meanwhile, trans activists were doing their whole nails on a chalkboard routine. So the White House quickly put out a new statement to shut these people up. And this one was signed by Biden's domestic policy advisor, Neera Tanden. And this time around, as The Guardian reported, the White House reaffirmed support for gender-affirming surgeries on minors. Now, at the same time, the White House claimed that these surgeries aren't actually happening to any significant degree. Quote, gender-affirming surgeries are typically reserved for adults, and we believe they should be, Tanden said. This is a tactic that we're all very familiar with by now. The same approach was used to promote abortion to great effect, and is still used. In both cases, the left understands that the policy they're supporting is horrific. They also understand that sane people would throw them out of office if there was any honesty about what was actually happening. And so therefore, instead of being honest, they lie about what they're supporting and what they're funding. And eventually inertia takes over. Clinton famously said that abortion would be rare. And for the Biden administration and trans activists, the claim has been that trans surgeries on children aren't happening. And if they are happening, it's only in the most extreme, rare cases. So here, for example, is a quote-unquote fact check by a CBS affiliate in Missouri called KMOV St. Louis. And this aired in May of 2023, several months before Missouri passed a law banning child butchery in hospitals in the state. Watch as the news station declares flatly that no children are undergoing trans surgeries in the state. Listen.
Another statement from A.G. Bailey was, mutilating children for the sake of a woke leftist agenda has irreversible consequences. Suzanne is the mother of a transgender teen.
At least in Missouri, nobody under 18 is getting this gender-affirming surgery.
So this is the kind of reporting we've all heard seemingly millions of times. You're a bigot if you claim that kids are being surgically mutilated. You're spreading misinformation, they say. It's not happening, but if it is happening, it's good. That's the familiar tactic. And again, they'll tell you that that's what they tell you. It's either not happening or it's only happening in the most rare cases. And either way, stop talking about it and asking questions, you bigot. Harvard School of Public Health posted a study this summer with this headline, quote, gender-affirming surgeries rarely performed on transgender youth. The activist group called the Human Rights Campaign put out a similar lie, quote, surgery under the age of 18 is very rare and is decided on a case-by-case basis. Gender-affirming surgeries are not performed on children. Now, over the past few years, there's been some reporting showing that specific hospitals are, in fact, performing surgeries on minors in the name of gender-affirming care. Boston Children's Hospital, for example, performed at least 65 double mastectomies on children for that purpose between 2017 and 2020, and that's documented in medical literature. And last year, the Daily Caller reported that a gender clinic in Pennsylvania offered puberty blockers to kids as young as 8 and surgery referrals at 14. The White House, trans activists, and medical associations have been able to maintain the fiction that these are either non-existent or extremely rare procedures conducted only by a small handful of hospitals because of a deliberate large-scale media blackout on the truth. But yesterday, the group Do No Harm, which is an association of medical professionals, ended that blackout. They launched an online, publicly accessible database called Stop the Harm, which exposes the extent of child mutilation that's occurring in hospitals across the United States. Now, before I go any further, it's important to keep in mind that this database relies on insurance claims information, which means that, if anything, it is almost certainly substantially undercounting the actual number of trans surgeries and procedures that are taking place because it doesn't capture operations that were paid for outside of insurance. And additionally, the database doesn't include claims paid out by Kaiser Insurance, which is a huge insurer, but their data was not available. And on top of that, the database only captures children who received a formal gender-related diagnosis. Now, given those limitations, here's what the group uncovered. Between 2019 and 2023, a minimum of 13,994 children underwent sex change treatments. Specifically, more than 5,700 minors had sex change surgeries, according to Do No Harm's database. More than 8,500 received hormones and puberty blockers. And in all, more than 62,000 sex change prescriptions were written for minors. Now, these procedures in total involve doctors billing insurance for roughly $120 million. And there's evidence that a very small number of doctors are racking up huge bills. A single doctor at New York's Mount Sinai Beth Israel Hospital, for example, billed nearly $5 million over the last 4 years for sex change interventions involving children, according to Do No Harm. A doctor at Stanford billed more than $4 million for the same purpose. In Missouri alone, Do No Harm found that there were more than 194 minor sex change patients from 2019 to 2023. 44 of them received surgery at places like St. Louis Children's Hospital and Children's Mercy Hospital. 151 received hormones and puberty blockers, which means that the fact check from the CBS affiliate KMOV that I played earlier was just a straight up lie. I mean, there was nothing remotely accurate about it. They denied that this was happening at all. Turns out it is happening. It has happened. Now, as striking as all these numbers are, I think there's another figure that is even more astounding. If you look through the database, you'll find that approximately 2,000 hospitals and medical facilities in this country performed some kind of gender transition, whether surgical or pharmaceutical, on a child between 2019 and 2023. So thousands of hospitals and medical facilities, including some of the biggest children's hospitals in the country, have been participating in this butchery. And this is a practice that left-wing activists say is very rare, if they don't deny that it's happening entirely, but it's happening all over the place, specifically in about 2,000 places. The perpetrators include the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Boston's Children's Hospital, the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, Seattle Children's, New York University, Vanderbilt University Medical Center, the Cincinnati Children's Hospital. These are all massive institutions. The list also includes smaller facilities like the University of Kentucky Children's Hospital, the Children's Hospital of New Orleans, St. Luke's Children's Hospital in Idaho, and many hundreds of others in between. Now, whatever you call this barbarism, there's one word you certainly can't use to describe it, and that is rare or very rare. And you also can't deny that it's happening at all. At a minimum, thousands of hospitals and medical procedures, medical clinics are performing thousands of life-altering procedures on children, whether it's surgical or pharmaceutical. And some of the most powerful institutions in this country, from the government to the media, have been lying to our faces about it for years. That is now very clear. Now, it's also clear that if Kamala Harris somehow becomes the president of the United States in a couple of months, this evil is only going to accelerate. Now, previously on the show, I've played footage from the various segregated Zoom calls that have been organized independently to promote the Kamala Harris campaign. So there's the white dudes for Harris, black women for Harris, and so on and so on. There have been many of these. Well, I've now obtained footage from a new one. This is from the Trans Families for Harris organization, and they had their own Zoom call. And in this call, several parents said that they support Kamala Harris because they want the ability to change their child's gender, despite the fact that changing their child's gender is, of course, medically and scientifically impossible. Here's one example. This is a guy named Jeff Bender, and he says that his 11-year-old son is now a girl who uses she, her pronouns, and it's all because of the wisdom of his son's second grade teacher. And now Jeff is going to take his son across state lines to Illinois, which is more than 3 hours away, to begin so-called gender-affirming care. Watch.
An important thing happened to my daughter. We've always known that our daughter, ever since she was born, she was always who she was. And so it didn't come to a surprise for us to find out when she chose to start using she, her pronouns. But the reason she chose she, her pronouns was because of her second grade teacher. And when we limit our teachers' access to our kids, which they spend more time with our children than we do as parents, when we limit that access, when we limit what they can do and how they can help our kids grow, I can only imagine the hurt and the struggles that some of these kids are going to end up going through. But because she had a second grade teacher that stepped up and let her know, you decide who you want to be. It's not about what your parents say or your grandparents say. You know you. So from this moment forth, in this school, who do you want to be? And in second grade, my daughter chose she, her. My daughter is now 11, and we have our very first appointment for our gender-affirming care. Our hospital, our children's hospital here in St. Louis, was shut down. Our doctor was made to flee the state and is now working somewhere else. And our first appointment is at the end of this month in Peoria, Illinois. And if you're not familiar with the area, that is a 3-hour drive from our house.
There are a lot of, unfortunately, pathetic men in this country. And that might be, of all the pathetic men, the most pathetic one I've ever seen in my life. To have some other adult indoctrinate your son into believing he's a girl and you're grateful for it. You're just going along with it because you trust this other adult's judgment about your child more than your own. I mean, pathetic doesn't even begin to describe it. So he just comes out and says that what teachers say is more important than what parents say. If your teacher says that your son's a girl, then your son's a girl. He's fine with teachers telling children to disregard their parents, which is something that no teacher, much less a second grade teacher, should ever be saying. Now, you won't be shocked to learn that this kind of sentiment was widely shared on this Zoom call. Another parent, a former Democrat congresswoman named Maria Newman, explained that her child was, she says, suicidal as a young teen. So she sent him to an intensive 3-month group therapy program with sessions lasting 12 hours per day. And just 3 days into this therapy camp, her son came home and announced that he's actually a girl named Evie. Watch.
About 2 days before she graduated from 8th grade, she came downstairs crying to my husband. And I said, I know I'm being a jerk, Mom and Dad. I have 2 solutions for you. One is, I can just run away. I know I'm a hassle. And the other was, I can kill myself. And obviously, we wrapped her up in a big old hug and said, we're with you. We're going to solve this. Don't worry. We got you. A couple of days later, she graduated from 8th grade. We then found a wonderful organization that specialized in adolescents with deep depression, severe social anxiety, and other challenges, right? Well, this wonderful group therapy group helped her find the words. And she said in group therapy, we put her in group therapy, and it was a 3-month program, 12 hours a day to help her find her true authenticity. She did. She came home that night. It was just 3 days into the therapy. And she said, Mom, we were sitting at dinner and I had made spaghetti. And she said, this is really good, but I think I have better news. And I said, what? And she said, I think I know what it is. I'm not a boy. I'm a girl. And my name is Evie. And so amazing, right? I threw my, arms up in my air, and I was so excited. I said, that is the best news I've ever had. So.
Yeah, that kind of thing makes me really angry, as it would any sane person, especially any parent, for a lot of reasons. And one of them is that, as critical as I often am of therapy, of the therapy industry, and I mean, this is, right here is why. But as critical as I am, I also recognize that there are times when it's necessary, or at the very least would be a really important resource for a person to have, including children. There are times when you could have a child who's struggling with something, especially if your child, God forbid, is suicidal, when therapy, it makes sense that you would want to find therapy for your child. But this is what, as a parent, this is what you're facing. I mean, this is the great danger. It should be a pretty simple thing that okay, your child needs therapy, and you go and you find a therapist who's licensed and educated in the field, and you should be able to generally trust almost any of them, just like you would generally trust almost any dentist, unless for some reason you've heard really horrific things about a particular dentist. But that's not the case here at all. I mean, it's a very good chance that you send your child into therapy and they're going to come out 3 days later announcing that, I'm actually trans. That is how quickly the indoctrination can set in. And children who are in therapy, by definition, are the most susceptible to it because they're already troubled, they're already struggling. So it's just evil beyond measure. So we've reached a point where the same people who claim to oppose conversion therapy, whatever that was exactly, whatever that was supposed to be, are now openly celebrating therapy sessions that supposedly convert their child into a different gender. Or by using their language, convert their child from quote-unquote cisgender to trans. So apparently that kind of conversion is completely fine. If you want to get indoctrinated into the LGBTQIA plus alphabet soup by your teacher or your therapy camp, then that's worth celebrating. But if anyone tells you that this is dangerous, that it puts you on the path to sterilization and life-destroying surgeries, then they're engaging in conversion therapy, and they're terrible people. This is the kind of dishonesty and manipulation that underlies the entire gender ideology movement and has since its inception. There's no consistency here, obviously. It's an ideology that can only survive by burying as much information as possible so that people don't realize what's actually happening. And what's happening is that a massive industry has sprung up to monetize an unprecedented social contagion. The New York Times just reported that 1 out of every 33 high school kids now identifies as trans. This is a massive increase in a very short period of time. As Robert Sterling pointed out, the DSM-4, which was in effect from 1994 until 2013, estimated that transsexualism, as they called it at the time, affected 1 out of every 30,000 males and 100,000 females. In other words, just a decade ago, researchers were supposedly off by a factor of 1,000 about the number of people who are, quote unquote, transgender. I mean, that's what a social contagion looks like. That's clear to anyone who looks at the data. And it's also a booming industry, and a lot of so-called physicians are taking full advantage of it. That's why this week's report from Do No Harm is so important. More Americans than ever are now aware of how widespread this agenda really is. And that is the first and most important step in achieving a goal that all sane people want, which is to protect children by shutting all of this down. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Let me tell you about a looming threat to our constitutional republic that the mainstream media won't cover. The radical left is plotting a Supreme Court coup. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. These progressive ideologues want to eliminate the court's conservative majority by packing it with their own hand-picked justices. It's not court reform, it's a blatant power grab to get the outcomes they want. And here's the frightening part. If one party controls the House, Senate, and presidency come January, they could restructure the court overnight. With a simple majority vote and a president's signature, their plan becomes reality. It's like they're trying to speed run the destruction of our judicial system. We've already seen their playbook: made up ethical attacks on justices, illegal protests at their home, and open threats from so-called representatives. It's Venezuela-style court packing, and it would spell the end of judicial independence and the rule of law as we know it. But hey, who needs checks and balances when you can have a rubber stamp for your radical agenda, right? But there's hope. First Liberty is leading the charge to protect the Supreme Court from this radical plan. They're fighting to preserve the legitimacy of the court and the separation of powers that safeguards our freedoms. Here's what you got to do. Go to supremecoup.com/Walsh. That's supremecoup.com/Walsh to learn how you can help stop the left's takeover of the Supreme Court. The future of our country is quite literally in your hands. Check out supremecoup.com/Walsh today. Kamala has been doing the interview rounds, as we've covered. She was on the Call Her Daddy sex podcast last week. She did Howard Stern. She was on with Stephen Colbert this week. We'll have some clips from that. But she was also on The View all in the last few days. So she's going to the absolute safest, least challenging forums she can possibly find. And even in those forums, it's not going especially well. Here's a clip that lots of people are talking about. This is from her segment on The View. For Kamala Harris, The View is pretty much the safest of all the safe places that you can go, and there are many safe places for someone like her with her political views. But The View most of all. And yet, even on The View, she found herself facing what proves to be a difficult question for her, and it didn't go, as I said, it didn't go very well. Let's watch that.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Well, Donald Trump approves that message. We know that. And she's getting a hard time for that answer. Conservatives are mocking her for it. But really, what do you expect her to say? I mean, it's not a bad answer so much as, I mean, she's bad at her job and so is Biden. So it's the job that has been bad, not the answer, because the truth is that there's no good answer. When she's asked, what would you do differently from Biden? There really is no good answer. I mean, if she says that she would do things differently from Biden, then she's turning on the administration that she's a part of. She's agreeing with Trump that Biden is, Biden screwed up and that, and that becomes the headline. And then she's really in the impossible position of having to argue that she, as somebody at least partially responsible for those failures, is better equipped to fix them than a person who was not responsible for them. And she can't really do that. I don't think politically she can come out and start talking about the things that she wants to do better than Joe Biden. That would probably be a political disaster for her. At the same time, it's also a political disaster to say that she won't change anything. You know, they're both disasters, and there is no good answer. And that's what happens when you're incompetent and he's incompetent, and now you're running and you're asking the voters for a promotion. It creates all kinds of impossible scenarios and unanswerable questions. So you're also you're starting to understand why she didn't do any interviews for the first month of her campaign. It's not just that she's really bad at them, though she is. It's also that there are so many questions she can't answer. Even if she was brilliant, she wouldn't really be able to answer them because of her unique situation. And her unique situation is that she's the vice president of a failed administration, and she's trying to run as a kind of change candidate, even though she's an incumbent, essentially. And that it's untenable. It's an untenable situation. She did get a second chance. Colbert asked her later in the day, the same day, I think, asked her the same question again. So this is take two. And here's what she came up with.
Polling shows that a lot of people, especially independent voters, really want this to be a change election, and that they tend to break for you in terms of thinking about change. You are a member of the president's administration. Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of... But also, I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump. And so when we think about the significance of what this next generation of leadership looks like, were I to be elected president, it is about, frankly, I love the American people, and I believe in our country. I love that it is our character and nature to be an ambitious people. We have aspirations, we have dreams, we have incredible work ethic, and I just believe that we can create and build upon the success we've achieved in a way that we continue to grow opportunity, and in that way grow the strength of our nation. So, for example, my economic policies, I think of it, and I have named it as creating an...
Shut up. Good Lord, she's so dumb. She's so dumb. So that's her revised answer, is that she'll be different from Biden because she's not him, which is true technically. I mean, she is a different person. She's like physically not the same person biologically. Their DNA is not the same. So she's not him. And also she believes in the dreams and aspirations of the American people. I mean, that stuff, it's one of her go-tos. I will say it's a little disappointing because she said, she began the sentence with, when you think about the significance of, and everybody at home, when you hear that, you're like, she's good, because you think she's going to give us a passage of time. Usually when you think about the significance of the passage of time is what she would say. And so I thought she was going to do the thing again with the passage of time. And that's a crowd pleaser. That's a greatest hit. And that would have been great, but she didn't. Instead, she started blathering about the dreams and aspirations of the American people. I know I said there's no good answer here. Like, there really isn't. I don't even know. I mean, if I wanted to help her politically, I'm not sure I could come up with a good answer that she can give to that question. But even so, especially that answer there was still, even acknowledging there's no good answer because she's incompetent, Joe Biden's incompetent, and their administration has been such a disastrous failure. So all you can really do is obfuscate and, filibuster and change the subject. So that's the only choice you really have, is that. She's trying to do that here, and she's so bad at it. Especially, and there's nothing cringier with Kamala than when she lapses into this motivational speaker thing. And you could tell that she thinks she's being so inspirational, but it's so incredibly lame. But none of that matters anyway, because who cares about what kind of job Kamala Harris can do or has done? Who cares about her competence? All that matters is that you can sit down with Kamala and have a beer. And if you didn't know that, they proved it in this interview by drinking a beer. Let's watch that.
When you first became the nominee and named Tim Walz as your vice president nominee, people were calling it the vibe election. All the vibes were all good. But elections, I think, are won on vibes because one of the old saws is they just want somebody they can have a beer with. Uh-huh. So would you like to have a beer with me so I can tell people what that's like? Okay. This was... Now, we asked ahead of time because I can't just be giving a drink to the Vice President of the United States without asking. You asked for Miller High Life. You asked for Miller High Life. I'm just curious.
Okay, the last time I had beer was at a baseball game with Doug.
So cheers.
Cheers.
There you go. Ooh. That tastes like the beautiful city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
The champagne of beers.
There you go.
Well, I mean, never mind. I'm going to vote for Kamala, I think. She drank a beer. I'm convinced. I don't know about you guys. I'm convinced. Hey, this woman can drink a beer, then that's what you need in a president. People are applauding. Why are you applauding that she took a sip of beer? What's even going on in your mind? I mean, there's nothing going on in your mind. They're just trained SEALs, and probably the applause sign was lit up. I mean, certainly it was, and so they were obeying that. But still, it's so lame. They're going out of their way to try to prove they know. They've basically, and Colbert kind of admits it, that, yeah, it is a vibe election. Okay, so what? Because they can't sell her based on her accomplishments. She has no accomplishments. They can't sell her based on her skills. She has no skills. The only thing they have are the vibes, and but she has none of the vibes. She doesn't. She can't do it. She can physically take a sip of beer, and that's it. Now, if you're not convinced that Kamala is personable and relatable, if the beer didn't convince you, if the fact that she's capable of taking a sip of crappy beer, if that didn't convince you that she's relatable and she's your best friend, well, then check out this moment from Howard Stern, her Howard Stern interview. This was the other very, very probing interview that she sat down for. And well, if the beer wasn't enough, then I think probably this will be.
When you ran for Senate, it was bittersweet, right? You won, which is great. But you said, I ate a whole bag of Doritos that night. That's your thing, Doritos?
Oh, I love Doritos. Original nacho. But let me just tell you, it was a family-sized bag.
Wow.
I sat on the couch.
But you're in good shape. Were you like
I work out every morning.
Did you work out this morning?
I did.
Where did you work out?
On the elliptical at the hotel.
Oh, they bring one up to your room?
Yeah.
Nice. How long do you go on the elliptical?
Half an hour to 45 minutes.
You're not bored out of your skull on that thing?
I'm watching a variety of things. That's how I catch
Morning
it.
Joe?
Yeah.
He's
sometimes.
Something, huh?
Yeah.
That Morning Joe.
Uh-huh.
I love that guy.
I do too. Joe Scarborough. Yeah.
A former Republican.
Yes.
He can't vote in his own
but
party.
He loves our country. I don't agree with him on every issue, but we agree on I think the most important at this moment for sure.
Why are you eating for breakfast?
So she's had Doritos. She likes Doritos. I don't know if you've heard that. This is actually, the fact that she likes Doritos is a pillar of her campaign. It's one of the most, as far as her campaign's concerned, it's one of the most salient facts about her is that she likes Doritos because nobody cares. Up to this point, no one's asked. Only Howard Stern is vapid enough to ask about it. But we've heard it anyway, over and over and over again, is that she likes Doritos. This is how desperate they are to make her relate to the common man. And it doesn't work. And also, by the way, like it It wouldn't even matter if it did. Even if you could convince us that she's a really personable, friendly person and would be a lot of fun to hang out with, which you have not convinced us of that, but even if you could, it still would not mean anything. It would not get you closer, even an inch closer, to proving that she'd be a good president. But now that we've gone through all that, and even though the personable element doesn't really matter for a president, I don't care if a president is personable. It doesn't matter to me. I care if they can get the job done. But let's just compare, now that we've seen Kamala trying her best to be relatable and personable, let's compare Kamala attempting to do this in these kinds of sort of casual conversations to Trump doing the same thing. So here's Trump on Andrew Schultz's podcast, and this just came out this morning, I think. And here's just one clip. We'll play a little bit of this.
Over the last week, I have to, when we talk about funny or sad, I think it's more sad than funny.
Yeah.
He has one ability I don't have.
Yeah.
He sleeps. He can sleep. This guy goes on a beach and he lays down on one of those, 6 ounce, they weigh 6 ounces and you can't lift it.
Yeah.
They're meant for children.
Yeah.
Young people and old people to lift.
Yeah.
They're aluminum, hollowed aluminum.
Yeah.
They weigh very little, and he can't lift. And somebody convinced him he looks good in a bathing suit. And when you're 82, typically bathing suits aren't going to make you look great. You're not going to be enhanced.
Yeah.
All right? It's just one of those things. I can't be sure about that, but typically you don't.
Depends what he's packing. He could.
I don't know
what
the hell he's packing, but I don't want to, and I don't want to know either. I don't know, but he has an ability to fall asleep while on camera. He can lie down on one of those things, and in minutes, he's stone cold out.
How does he do it?
And he's got cameras on because he's the president, so they have cameras on him.
Yeah.
And then they show him sleeping on the beach.
Yeah.
You'll never see me sleeping in front of camera.
And the whole interview is like that, I'm sure. This is the one of the many differences between Kamala and Trump, and this is why her media assault right now to try to make herself seem like a real person, it's doomed to fail, because it's really the worst strategy I think that they could choose for Kamala. There probably aren't any good strategies for her, but it might be the worst one to put her in these kinds of environments. It's the worst thing they could do. Yeah, she's not good at real interviews. She obviously did very poorly in the 60 Minutes interview, but I think of the two, you got to choose your poison pill. And if I'm running the Kamala campaign, I'm going to choose the 60 Minutes style interviews, because when you put her in these kinds of environments, she just doesn't do well. And now, but also she's in Trump's lane now. This is what Trump does better than any politician that's ever lived. He does this better than any politician ever anywhere in history. I mean, honestly. This kind of thing. If you could choose any politician that's ever existed to go on Andrew Schultz's podcast, or even Howard Stern, although Howard Stern would never have him now, but if you could choose anyone, you choose Trump. That's his thing. That's his lane. And for him, it's very effortless and casual, and he's funny, and he's talking to a comedian, making the comedian laugh. Kamala Harris would not be able to do that. So the contrast is not favorable to her at all. All right, yesterday we talked about the supposed controversy surrounding an interview on CBS with the author Ta-Nehisi Coates. And the controversy is that one of the anchors conducting the interview asked Coates a real question. Coates had just written a book that deals, at least in part, with the Israel-Palestine conflict. The book is apparently, not surprisingly, very one-sided in favor of Palestine. The anchor brings that up to Coates. We played the clip yesterday, and the author, Coates, actually admits that it is one-sided. He justifies it by saying that the other side is already well represented in the media, which, whether you believe that or not, is still an admission that the premise of the question was correct. So if you're on the side of Coates on this thing, then you shouldn't be upset at the question. It gave him a chance to explain why he approached the book the way that he did. And if you buy his explanation, then there's no reason to be upset. But lots of people were upset, including the staff at CBS. They were incensed that this anchor, one of their colleagues, had asked a black liberal author a real question in an interview, because you're not supposed to do that. So there's been an internal revolt. This led, as we discussed yesterday, to CBS bringing in a DEI expert who's not even certified like I am, and bringing him in to mediate and help staffers overcome the trauma of witnessing one of their colleagues committing journalism. Well, the Free Press obtained a brief audio snippet of the CBS editorial meeting behind the scenes where the anchor, whose name is Tony DeCouple, was publicly admonished by his bosses for asking a question. Here's the audio snippet with the Free Press setting it up. Here it is.
The Free Press obtained some leaked audio of a CBS editorial meeting in which DeCouple was trashed by his bosses in front of his colleagues for asking questions. His job. Let's take a listen.
And there are times we fail our audiences and we fail each other. We're in one of those times right now. And it's been growing. And now we are at a tipping point. Many of you have reached out to express concerns over recent reporting, specifically about the CBS Mornings Coates interview from last week, as well as comments made coming out of some of our correspondents' reporting. I want to thank every single one who reached out for your honesty, your transparency, and your commitment. So I want to address three things. Number one, after a review of our coverage, including the interview, it's clear there are times we have not met our editorial standards. Number two, this has been addressed, and it will continue to be in the future. And number three, I want to acknowledge and I want to apologize that it's taken this long to have this conversation.
Okay, now before we talk about that, we should also mention that DeCouple himself has apparently offered something of an apology to his colleagues. The New York Post reports CBS Morning co-host Tony DeCouple told staffers during an emotional meeting that he regretted putting them in a difficult position amid the brewing scandal at the network over his grilling of an anti-Israel author, the Post has learned. The embattled anchor spoke at Tuesday's staff-only meeting, which was not attended by co-hosts Gayle King and Nate Burleson, the day after being reprimanded by CBS brass for his fiery sit-down with Ta-Nehisi Coates. Tony said he regretted putting his colleagues in that position, according to an insider, especially the ones overseas and in danger. There were tears. People were very upset. So according to this, he didn't apologize for asking the question, but he did say that he regretted the position that he put everybody in. This sounds like the classic, I'm sorry if I offended you type of move, which, if this report is accurate, is still pretty pathetic because he has nothing to regret. He didn't put anyone in any kind of position. If his colleagues are in tears, because he asked a question to a guest during an interview in which questions are typically asked, if that's the case that he shouldn't be expressing any regret about it, he should be saying that, if he regrets anything, if anything at all, he regrets the fact that he apparently works at a daycare center surrounded by 2-year-olds. He should say he regrets that. I mean, if it were me, that's what I would say. My regret is that I thought I was working for a news organization. I accidentally, apparently signed up to work at a daycare center. That's my regret. My bad on that one. But he didn't say that, and I'm not surprised that he didn't say that, especially with his bosses publicly scolding him like this. That would take some real courage. And you see this a lot. Most people will just go along with the insanity, and there's a smaller group of people who will poke their heads up and exhibit some basic level of sanity and common sense. In the journalism world, you've got a few journalists who every once in a while will show that that they understand what their job is and they're willing to do it. But the problem is that even most of those people, when they commit that flagrant act of common sense or sanity or journalism, there's an even smaller sliver of that small sliver who will stand by it through the backlash that is sure to come. So the whole thing is really insane, obviously. And it goes to show something that I've certainly discovered and demonstrated over the last few years, that one of the gravest sins on the left is to ask questions. That truly is for them like one of the worst things you can do. To ask a question, a real question, is an unforgivable sin. It's a mortal sin. It is a sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance, according to the leftist religion, is to ask questions. And why is that? Because a question, and they respond this way, I think, to questions even more than to statements they don't like. Because a statement that they don't like, well, that could upset them too and make them cry. You get a similar reaction. But a question has the possibility of exposing their worldview and exposing their heroes in a way that no mere declarative statement ever could. And that's why this is one of the number one rules on the left, is that you don't ask questions. I mean, not real ones anyway. That much is clear. All right, let's talk about your metabolism. You know, that thing that determines whether you're burning fat or just storing it. Well, now I'm not one for fad diets or miracle cures, but I am interested in real solutions that actually work. That's why I want to tell you about Lumen. Lumen isn't some gimmicky weight loss scheme. It's a serious tool for understanding and improving your metabolic health. Let me tell you, in today's world of processed foods and sedentary lifestyles, we could all use a little help in that department. Here's how it works. You breathe into the device first thing in the morning, and it tells you if you're burning fat or carbs. It's that simple, but it doesn't stop there. Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for the day based on your measurements. You can even use it before and after workouts and meals to know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. Now, why does this matter? Well, because your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how you turn food into fuel. And when your metabolic health is optimal, you get a bunch of benefits: easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, even better sleep. Who doesn't want that? And for the ladies out there, Lumen even tracks your cycle and adjusts for menopause. It gives you recommendations to keep your metabolism healthy through those hormonal shifts, so you can keep your energy up and fight off those cravings, because apparently your hormones affect more than just your mood. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Walsh to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Walsh for 15% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. Over the past 2 years, DW Plus has collaborated with Jordan B. Peterson on a collection of shows to help you win at life, the Mastering Life Collection with Jordan B. Peterson. Mastering Life topics range from marriage to masculinity and managing mental health with Jordan B. Peterson's newest series, Depression and Anxiety. Plus, coming this fall are Jordan Peterson's 2 new Mastering Life series, one on negotiation and one on success. Become a DailyWire Plus member for unlimited access to Jordan B. Peterson's incredible Mastering Life collection today at dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code Jordan at checkout for 35% off your new annual memberships. That's dailywire.com/subscribe. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. Today for our daily cancellation, we begin with a crazy TikTok video. And, we haven't had one of these in a surprisingly long time on the show, it feels like. I realized sometime around 6 months ago that, I was arguably spending a little too much time on the show offering in-depth analysis of lunatics on TikTok. So try to branch out a bit for a while. But now we're back to that well again because of this video that I stumbled across after it went viral on Twitter. This is a woman, apparently in the year of our Lord, 2024, talking about her COVID travel precautions. Watch.
This is how I travel as a COVID-conscious person. First, I use Covixol nasal spray before going to the airport, and I mask in the Uber, of course, and I always mask in the airport. When I get on the plane, I wipe down as much as I can with Clorox wipes, and I use my Pure Enrichment air purifier for the plane. I wait a little bit to eat after everyone else gets their snacks, and I plan to do as much of my activities outside as possible. When I get home, I wear a mask and test a few days in a row.
Now, again, I emphasize this video is not from 2020 or 2021, even though it would have been insane even back then, but some people are still living like this. In fact, this video Because at first, you see, living in my world, you see a video like that, you're like, well, this must be a parody. I mean, this is not, who is still doing this? So I had to confirm that it was not a parody video, and I don't believe that it is, and because my investigation sent me down a very regrettable rabbit hole where I discovered that COVID conscious is now an identity group on the left where only the wokest of the woke claim membership. I mean, this is high level. These are the high level woke people. This is a pretty exclusive club, is COVID conscious. There's a whole subgenre of TikTok videos where the COVID conscious, years after everyone else has moved on, are still allowing COVID to dominate and dictate their lives. And there are just many examples of this, but here's another one.
Pack up my Airstreamer bag with me. So the most important thing to know about me is I still don't want to get COVID. I've never gotten it as far as I know, and I don't plan on doing it, but I really want to see this concert. So we got my stadium bag and my portable air filter. The way I rigged it here with this plastic ring that I had lying around, I figure, I can go in and out with it easy. And then it can also hang on me. And then when it's out and the bag is hanging on me, it blows right up into my face. First thing I want to do is, because I'm bringing extra masks for other people, I'm going to put all of these masks. I have these KF94s that actually go so well with my dress, but I'm going to be wearing probably my Cambridge mask. This is my favorite one. I've also got 3M Auras. I have a bunch of KN95s in the car that I'm also going to put in that are colorful. Since these are for other people, I figure the colorful ones, the black ones, those are the real winners, and any mask is better than no mask, so even if you're not going to wear an Aura, which would protect you the most, you're wearing something, and that's awesome.
Now, that video goes on, by the way, for 7 more minutes. She has barely begun to describe all of her COVID safety measures. Wearing a mask and bringing a stash of several dozen additional masks is just the start of it. It was encouraging to see, by the way, in her among all of her tools, all of her equipment there was, I think I did see some deodorant. So that's progress for these people. But sometimes these COVID conscious videos do feature a little bit of introspection. And these are the interesting ones. I found several videos like this where some of these people, it's actually quite sad. Some of these people seem to be aware of how bizarre their behavior is and how dysfunctional it is. And they do seem to be at some level troubled by it, but they just can't free themselves. They can't break free. Here's one example.
But I was up in the Pearl yesterday, which is like north of downtown, and it was like 10 a.m. and things were buzzing, and everyone, no masks, just not a single one. But everyone was just behaving like things were normal, and I found myself as I was driving, wondering what that would be like. Like, I'm so deeply steeped in not normal that, like, the way I live is now my normal. Like, I can't imagine what that normal looks like. And is that part of my stubbornness? And the reason I bring it up is because I don't think that's unusual. Like, frequently I see in, there's a Zero COVID Reddit that I like, and in other online spaces where you see people at the end of the rope and they're like, what if tomorrow I just woke up and was like, let's just take our masks off and try it. And I think about that all the time.
Now, the caption on that video said, what if tomorrow we just stopped being COVID conscious? Well, so she's thinking about that anyway, but most of us can answer that question. The answer is that everything would be fine if that were to happen. Most of us are not conscious of COVID. We're aware of it, we're aware of it conceptually. We're not thinking about it. We aren't worried about it. We get sick and we don't test to see if we have it. We just live our lives. We've been doing that for years. Some of us never stopped doing that, even at the height of the panic. And everything is fine. Well, everything isn't fine at all, actually. Things are, pretty bad in many ways, but it has nothing to do with COVID. And the fascinating thing about these COVID conscious videos is that many of the people who are still stuck perpetually in like April of 2020 seem again to realize that, or they're on the verge of realizing it. But they've committed so much of themselves to the COVID panic. They've defined themselves by it to such an extent for so long now, like half a decade now, that they feel like they can't turn back. So it's exactly like someone who has been in a cult for years and is now having glimmers of doubt, but they feel like they can't leave the cult, even if part or all of them sort of wants to, because they'd be giving up their whole identity. They'd be starting over from scratch. And there's a little bit of the sunk cost fallacy where you think, well, I've already given so much of myself to this thing that I can't, it's all a waste if I turn back now. If I 5 years later, if I'm like, yeah, okay, COVID, I'm not worried about it anymore. Well, I just wasted 5 years of my life. I've alienated all my friends and family. They don't want to be around me. I've done all that for nothing. So that's what they're thinking. And then, of course, there are still the COVID conscious people who are still at this point true believers. Not a hint of it, retrospection or introspection can be detected with these people. But here's the point. I've been thinking about this. How do these people still exist? Like, what's going on in their minds? And I think that it's not a coincidence that the COVID conscious people are all on the left. I mean, every single one. We take that for granted, of course, but it is worth thinking about that this is not a delusion that exists on both sides of the political spectrum. This is an identity group that exists entirely on the left. I mean, if you see someone today wearing a mask, you could be 1,000% sure that that person is not only on the left, but is far left. There isn't anything analogous even happening on the right. We have some kooky people over on our side too. Kooks come in all shapes, sizes, and political affiliations, but there isn't any group that defines itself by its fear of a disease on our side. On the left is where you find the COVID conscious. It's also where you find every other delusional identity group. The left has, as we know, many different identity groups, and many of them are fundamentally defined by their rejection of reality. Why is that the case? Well, because this is one of the primary ways that the left propagates itself and recruits new adherents. And it's a method, it's something about the left that isn't discussed nearly enough, which is that they legitimize mental illness and they provide the mentally ill with a community where they will be encouraged and affirmed. So when conservatives encounter a hypochondriac, which that's what these people are, you're still wearing a mask, you're walking around with an air purifier blowing into your face. I mean, this is, at any other point, somebody like this would go to a therapist, they'd be immediately recognized and diagnosed as a hypochondriac, and hopefully they'd get some psychiatric treatment for that. So on the right, when we encounter a hypochondriac whose whole life revolves around avoiding illness, we respond by telling the person that they're wrong. And maybe we're sort of blunt about it in some cases. We say that they're delusional, they need psychiatric help. Now, there are polite ways of putting it and rude ways of putting it, but generally speaking, telling someone like this that they're wrong, that this is a delusional belief, they need help, that is morally and ethically and factually the right way to respond. But the thought leaders on the left, they're not going to say that. Instead, they open their arms to the hypochondriac and they say, yes, you're right. COVID is still an existential threat to humanity. In fact, we have an identity group ready-made just for people like you. Come over here with us. Bring your masks and your hand sanitizer. We've got a space set aside just for you. It's already been cleaned with Lysol wipes. We'll never tell you that you're wrong about anything. You're safe here. Affirmation is the cardinal virtue of the left. It is really the only virtue. What you believe is true because you believe it. However you live is the right way to live because it's how you live. Nobody is delusional, except Trump voters, of course. But all other viewpoints and lifestyles are legitimate and true. And in fact, the more removed from reality they are, and the more self-destructive they are, the more legitimate they are. This is simultaneously how they spread mental illness, the left does, and how they expand their own ranks by recruiting and validating those mental illnesses. The COVID cautious community is just one of many examples. This is maybe the greatest secret of the left's cultural success. There are no more insane asylums because leftism is the asylum. And that is why the COVID cautious people, and especially the ideology that validates them, are today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
Today on The Ben Shapiro Show, the polling data roll in from the blue wall states as Kamala's lead collapses. Harris continues her magical mystery tour of idiocy, and CBS News breaks down over accidentally doing a journalism to racialist sacred cow, Ta-Nehisi Coates. That's today on The Ben Shapiro Show. Give it a listen.